Archives. It's not a word we use every day, is it? Archives? A place or collection containing records, documents, or other materials of historical interest to a group of people or institution. And yet, every person in this Danziger chapel and every person in this world has an archive, a personal archive. Yesterday was the Danzigers' anniversary. In their archive, they know the number. It was other people's birthdays and anniversaries too. Yesterday also would have been my father's 78th birthday. His older brother, now 83, the last living relative on his side, recounted to me yesterday not only how much he's missed my dad these past 7 years, but how much he thinks about the memories of his brother that he never wrote down. Birthday parties when my father was a kid. I'm still learning about Jewish Providence, Rhode Island in the late 30s and early 40s. Beyond our own personal archives, we need communal archives, as was just made clear to me again at the Memphis Jewish Home, where I led Shabbat services a few hours ago. The participants at today's service could not read. And one lucid gentleman asked me how he could pray Rosh Hashanah next week if he cannot read. I told the group what most people don't know. Maybe you don't know. The holiday we celebrate next Wednesday evening was not even called Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, until Talmudic times. That's late. I asked the man, "Can you hear a shofar sound?" He said, "Yes." I asked him, "Can you remember not what you ate for breakfast yesterday, but can you remember things from your childhood?" "Why, yes," he said. Then I replied, "You are more ready for Rosh Hashanah than people who can read. Because if you can hear the shofar sound, the holiday is called Yom Teruah in the Torah, and even if you are deaf, it's repeatedly called something else you told me you can do. It's called in the Torah next Wednesday night, Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembering." So I asked the entire group, all 9 of them at the home, what they remember. One elderly woman recalled when her brother came home from the war. "Vietnam, Korea?" I asked. "No," she said, "World War II. 1945. "He was never the same again," she said. But he did share lots of stories, only they weren't recorded or written down. I looked around at these 9 elderly Jews, thinking about all the personal archives I was in front of. And I listened to the events and moments of great historical events. One woman had tears streaming down her face as she told these stories, but they were never archived. History is too often forgotten, even recent history. Kenner Kaplan, Rabbi Danziger, and I, and perhaps many of you, can recall when the great Shirley Feibelman of blessed memory started our temple archives, and daughter Lindy Feibelman succeeded her. That was over 10 years ago. The renewal of our synagogue, campus, and building had yet to be completed. So let me give you the history. While I was heavily involved with the Vision of the Generations campaign, I really only inserted myself in 3 areas. I insisted there be Jewish quotes around this building, everywhere, so that we know that everywhere in the temple, even by the everyday entrance and the offices and the early learning center, it's all holy ground, not just a sanctuary. My second request, frankly, was that we complement naming this the Danziger Chapel with an office right at the crossroads for our Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Harry. And my third request was that we move the library and archives out of the closet they were in and place them at the apex, the crossroads of our renewed facility. But even with one of the most venerable buildings, campuses, grounds, and renewed synagogues in the country, a place is only as great as its people. We needed the right leader after the Feibelmans, and we sure found it in Margie Greenstein. Everyone present tonight passed by the stained glass Mogen David Jewish stars of her Clarksdale, Mississippi temple when you entered the Danziger Chapel tonight. And Clarksdale is in the house tonight as well. But since the archives are about history, here's history you may not have known about Miss Margie. After graduating Alabama, studying art at Wash U in St. Louis, and moving west to California, Margie returned to the South in 1991. And when we asked Margie to be our chief archivist, her humility led her to say, "I'm not sure I know enough." Without her knowing, I called a dear friend, Rabbi Gary Zola, who heads the American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati, and the Cincinnati chief archivist, Kevin Prophet. "Send her up here," they said. "Send her up here to our Congregational Archives workshop." Friends, not only did Margie attend that workshop, she mastered the field, and she's made Memphis and Temple Israel known nationally as one of the leading congregational archives in the country. It's not an exaggeration. And it's all only happened in the past 10 years. The archives team has become one of the most active volunteer groups within our congregational family. It includes elders like Mary Schoenberg and Helga Cornell, college interns from the University of Memphis, and volunteers of all ages in between, including Freda Brody, Dick Rubin, Jack Lewis, Brenda Hapner, Betty Rubenstein, Barbara Zitrin, Arlene Schwartz, along with Mary and Helga, even Lieselot Esser, blessed memory, who was just laid to rest today. But it was a stalwart archives volunteer of blessed memory, Harriet Stern, whom we all miss so much. I'm smiling because whenever we think of Harriet, we think of her humility, but she was strong. She was the one tapped to persuade Margie into accepting the nomination to be president of the Jewish Historical Society of Memphis and the Mid-South. Not only was Margie well qualified for that role, she's quietly and steadily taught others and looked after the rest of the Jewish community from what she created here at Temple. You know the old Jewish adage, what grows never grows old? It applies to this extraordinary, understated woman. Margie continues the drawing, painting from the fine arts courses she started at Wash U's Art College, and she's been researching, writing, and editing a history of Clarksdale, Mississippi's Jewish families to be released when she has it just right. According to her, the perfectionist. Judy Ringel wrote the history of Temple Israel's first 150 years. Well, when the history of Temple post-2003, 2004 is written, the only reason that history can and will be written is because of the primary documents Margie has overseen and the team she has assembled to make history matter. Cheryl and I named our only son for my professor and dean of the archives, Dr. Jacob Rader Marcus. He founded the American Jewish Archives, and he always counseled us to learn from history in order to make tomorrow even better than today, so that this Jewish legacy doesn't die. Margie is a disciple of that idea. Because of her, we are not an ever-dying people. Because of Margie, we continue to be an ever-living people. But it's more than that. Those of us who work at this temple, 13 years ago, I introduced a Brit Avodah, a covenant of sacred work. Listen to what it is. It's for all who serve temple. It includes working hard in a humane manner by being kind, balanced, positive, and a team player, not gossiping, communicating well, by listening, reflecting Jewish values, like seeing temple's goals above one's own, being a mensch. If you ask any volunteer in the archives, you will understand how Margie is the poster child of our Brit Avodah. A relative of one volunteer wrote me unsolicited about how gracious Margie has been, always appreciative, always thanking her helpers. This relative writes, and I quote, "I'm not sharing with you everything I've gotten on Margie Kirstein." Just one quote. "Margie obviously values her helpers as volunteers and friends by the way she treats them. And I'm told that Margie was also a trooper on the Israel trip Rabbi Danziger led last year. Your adventurous spirit and ready smile make every group better, Margie. From Memphis to Israel, and certainly California where you're headed. Still, Margie, this temple and the Delta will always be your home, for this is where your roots were planted. We're honored on this Shabbat evening when we celebrate Margie, her brothers and sisters-in-law, Dr. Richard Kirstein and wife Mona, and Edwin Kirstein and wife Dottie are with us for this milestone occasion. And while Sister Mildred Jones is not able to be present in person, her entire archives, personal archives, family, informs the blessing that she is, that you are, to all whose lives you touch. Just one closing word from the Torah. It says in this week's Parsha, this week's Torah portion, Ki Tavo, Deuteronomy 26:11, V'samachta b'chol hatov asher natan lecha Adonai Elohecha uleveitecha. Listen to the translation. And you shall rejoice in all the good which the Lord your God has given you and your house. Tonight we rejoice in all the good which God has brought us through Margie in this house of prayer, religious community, and learning. And let us say, Amen.